Here we go.
Welcome to the March meeting of the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority. Thank you for attending. I'll briefly review the logistics for the meeting. All directors and staff have unmuted lines. In order to reduce background noise, please mute your lines while you are listening. All BFSA staff are in attendance. When speaking, please begin by stating your name. For votes on actions, I will call out each director individually, record his or her vote. For members of the public and representatives of the city and covered organizations, your lines are muted. We should be able to unmute individual lines for any questions directed to entity officials in attendance as we proceed with the meeting. Due to the circumstances of holding this meeting by conference call, we will not be holding the usual public comment session at the end of the meeting. Any comments should be submitted to the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority either by phone, excuse me, at 716-853-0907, or by email at info@bfsa.ny.gov. This contact information is available at the website as well. At this time, I ask Nikita to indicate who from the city and covered organizations are on the call.
Okay, just 1 minute. We might have some feedback.
We have City Comptroller's Office.
Tracy Cooley.
Thank you.
Okay, are we ready to proceed? Hello?
I think so. Nikita, was it just the controller's office? I heard Tracy Cooley from Borough Hop just join us. So it's
okay.
Yeah. I mean, not just those, but that's who's on the line. Thank you.
Okay, before proceeding, it's important to note that the information to be reviewed today was prepared prior to the pandemic impacting us as it is. Information related to the fiscal impact from this matter will be discussed at future meetings, although it's anticipated that it will be substantial on municipal budgets. Earlier today, the Audit, Finance, and Budget Committee met and authorized the posting of BFSA's 2020-21 preliminary budget and related four-year financial plan in accordance with legal requirements. A copy of this document is included under tab 1 of your board book. This preliminary budget and finance plan is prepared by BFSA staff, commences the public commentary period. If any director has any comments at this time, we will now record these comments. Any comments? Okay, hearing none. If there are any comments over the next few weeks, please submit them to Jeanette. An updated version will be circulated by email as necessary. Approval of the final budget will be required at the June board meeting prior to the start of the next fiscal year. There is no board action required today on this item. The revised agenda for today's meeting was emailed to you and outlines what we will discuss today. Please note the slides have been emailed to you and are posted on our website for public viewing. We'll begin, as always, with Secretary Arthur taking the role of the directors.
Chairman Olson.
Here.
Secretary Arthur is present. Vice Chair Jurazak is excused. Director Floss.
Here.
Mayor Brown.
Here.
County Executive Poloncarz.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, I am happy to announce that you have a quorum.
Yeah, thank you, George. That's very impressive. Since there is a quorum present, our first order of business is to approve the minutes from BFSA's December 12th, 2019 and February 25th, 2020 board meetings. Directors will
Chairman,
find...
I move to
Is there any additions, deletions for the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I guess, am I supposed to call out the names, Jeanette?
I think that was fine as is. Thank you.
Okay. The first time in our business is to honor, is for an honor for me to present, and it is truly an honor. We have a resolution honoring the enormous contributions made by Jim McGavern to the Bfsa and to Western New York community. This resolution reads as follows. Jeanette, could you read it?
Sure.
I misplaced mine.
That. That's okay. Okay, everybody can hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Whereas on July 3rd, 2003, the New York State Governor signed into law Chapter 122 of the laws of 2003, known as the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority Act, which created the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, or the Bfsa, to assist in the restoration of fiscal stability in the city of Buffalo and within its covered organizations. And whereas on September 24th, 2012, the Bfsa Board of Directors unanimously voted to engage the law firm of McGavern Grimm, LLP to provide legal services, noting specifically the ability of Mr. James L. McGavern, Esquire, to meet the unique needs of the Bfsa. Whereas Mr. McGavern brought an extensive amount of legal expertise in various municipal areas, both financial and operational, having served in the past as counsel to the Comptroller of the State of New York, County Attorney, and Assistant Attorney General of the State of New York, among others. And whereas Mr. McGavern has been honored by various organizations, including being selected by a Business First survey as Best Lawyer in Western New York in Government Negotiations, Lawyer of the Year by the Bar Association of Erie County, and was the recipient in 2001 of the Edwin F. Jekyll Award, the highest honor bestowed by the University at Buffalo Law School. And whereas Mr. McGavern's contributions to the community have been innumerable, including serving as president of the Bar Association of Erie County, chair of the Charter Revision Commission of the City of Buffalo, vice chair of the Erie County Charter Revision Committee, member of the New York State Commission on Government Integrity, chair of the Buffalo State College President's Blue Ribbon Committee on Equity and Diversity, chairman of the Buffalo Baseball Stadium Design Advisory Committee, chair of the panel to revise the Code of Ethics of the City of Buffalo, among other roles as member, director, and officer of other professional and civic organizations. Whereas Mr. McGavern's contributions to the community, the City of Buffalo, and the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority will endure and have a positive effect for future generations of the City of Buffalo. Now, let it be resolved that the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority does hereby honor and appreciate Mr. James L. McGavern, Esquire, for his outstanding contributions to the Buffalo Fiscal Stability Authority, the Buffalo City School District, the Buffalo Municipal Housing Authority, the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency, and the entire Western New York community. And approved today, March 23rd, 2020.
Okay. I'm sorry Jim can't be here today. On the phone, he has another engagement. I would like to add a few comments, if I could. I've known Jim virtually since the day that I moved to Buffalo. When I began to teach in the clinical education program, he was incredibly generous with his support, both logistical. He provided me with an office at his firm, actually, so that I could work downtown. He also, along with the late and greatly missed Milton Kaplan, provided enormous expertise that I lacked on municipal law, environmental law. He is quite simply the finest attorney that I've ever met. I've tried to model myself after his professional ethics and approach to the practice of law. For me, it's not saying too much to say that he is my Atticus Finch. I can't imagine I've never met a better lawyer or a finer person, and I've greatly appreciated the time of my working with him, which has extended through teaching classes together, including providing legal support to George and the City Charter Commission over the years. He is just absolutely unique and extraordinarily special person and attorney. I couldn't begin to describe the admiration that I hold for him.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I'd like to follow up on what you're saying and ask a couple of things. First, that there used to be, when I was on the council, we used to have what we call a special resolution memorializing and a resolution of felicitation, such as we're doing for Jim McGavin. And we used to ask the Franciscan nuns from them who are on Pine Ridge to do up a special resolution for us. It was handwritten and it was really first class. And what I'd like to see if they are still in the business of doing such, the city clerk should be able to tell us that. And if so, that we would ask them to or purchase their services to do this resolution in the way that they've done for the council in the past, number one. And number two, that all the members of the authority, our authority, would be signers on that resolution. When you talk about Jim McGavin, I go back not only with him, but I had the pleasure and the honor of serving with his father on the board of directors at the Albright Docks. I've had his son as one of my interns, and I've worked with, when I was chairman of the county the County Charter Revision Commission. Jim was my vice chairman. I made sure I had him there because for the things that I didn't know. And when he was chairman of the city charter revision, I was a member of that committee along with him. So we've had a lot of contact, and everything that you've said about him being first class is true. He's a man beyond reproach. He's a man of integrity, and really a very, very, very valuable asset. Has been a very, very valuable asset to not only the city but all of Western New York, and you could really say the state of New York. We're lucky to have him here in our forest here in Buffalo. Is one of the tall timbers in our forest, and it's too bad that we can't do more than just giving this felicitation, but it does express our feelings, and I think he is truly a great person.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion. I neglected to mention that I had the pleasure of teaching his son and daughter-in-law, who have continued in his extraordinary public service. Also, I had the great pleasure of hiring his son Sam to teach in the clinical education program at UB, and the entire he's had an extraordinary effect through the continued commitment and engagement of his immediate family as well. It's really a unique, absolutely unique situation. I can't imagine another lawyer who has so devoted himself to the public good of the community. I certainly agree with you that it's fully appropriate to do this upright.
do it right. And it's not only him. When you really take a look at it, it's his entire family. The McGavin family has truly been great citizens here. And Jim has carried on. His father was really outstanding, and Jim has carried on that tradition, him and his brother. So, I think that I will call, if it's okay, I will call the city clerk and them and see if the nuns are still in business. And if not, we need to get someone to do something special with this resolution.
I think that's right. I'm sure we can find someone to do it.
Yes.
I think it's an excellent idea.
Yes. With that, I would move the approval.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Very good. We couldn't begin to it's an excellent piece of work, but we couldn't begin to fully describe his contributions. Okay, and I'm sorry, Jeanette, I'll start calling out names.
That was the last action, so I'll forgive you.
I'll figure this out yet.
That's okay.
Hopefully
you don't have to figure it out. So.
We'll now move into the City of Buffalo items, which includes the review of the second quarter report and a brief overview of the New York State executive budget. This report related to the second quarter review and has been included under tab 3 of your board book. Jeanette and Bryce will discuss these items with us. So it goes to you, Jeanette.
And I'm going to punt it over to Bryce to begin. I have some comments later on. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the board this afternoon. I'll begin my presentation review of the city's second quarter report as of December 31st, 2019. Now, please keep in mind this presentation does not take into consideration the impact of the recent COVID-19 pandemic or the impact that it will have on revenues, specifically sales tax, fees, fines, and licenses. If we go to slide 2, you'll have a breakout of the adopted budget and what the second quarter year-end projections were. City's adopted budget consisted of $508.7 million in revenues and expenditures. At the end of the second quarter, the city is projecting a year-end favorable variance of $1 million. Revenue estimated at $510.5 million is a favorable variance of $1.8 million when compared to the adopted budget amount of $508.7 million. Expenditures are projected to be $509.5 million, an unfavorable variance of $800,000 when compared to the adopted budget amount of $508.7. Slide 3, we want to discuss revenues. The fiscal year at December 31st had a favorable variance of $1.9 million, consisting of $1.7 million in service charges. $1.4 million was this was a under budget in service charges of the 1.7. $1.4 million was related to the new mortgage default fee, which was instituted as part of the 2019-20 budget. Then an additional $200,000 for the rental registration fee. Now, in miscellaneous revenue, they're projecting to be over budget by $1 million. $1.2 million is a favorable variance to an award from the federal government for staffing for adequate fire and emergency response program, or a SAFER grant. Just to note, there is a corresponding increased expenditure in the fire department in regards to that. It's for the city to bring on an additional firefighter recruit class. Moving on to slide 4, continual revenues. There is a favorable variance of $900,000 in fines. At the time, $800,000 was in relation to the school zone cameras and the enforcement of speed limits around schools. $100,000 is in relation to all other fines. They're under intergovernmental revenues, there's a positive variance of $600,000 attributed to sales tax. Combined $1.1 million over budget for interest, license of permits, and taxes. There was a positive variance of $500,000 for interest income, $300,000 positive variance under building permits, and at that time a positive variance attributed to STAR payments in the amount of $300,000. Moving on to slide 5, expenditures. Fiscal year-end total expenditure projection is $800,000 above the adopted budget amount, so this is an unfavorable variance. $3.1 million of the total unfavorable budgetary variance is under departmental expenditures. $6.2 million is attributed to the fire department. They're expected to exceed budget by $6.2 million. This is a combination of the overtime, approximately $400 million, also bringing on the additional fire recruit class, approximately $1.2 million, and then various other payouts for retiring firefighters to make up that difference. The remaining departments are projected to be favorable by $3.1 million. Public Works, $1 million, Human Resources, $0.6 million, and all other departments for a net $1.5 million. Moving on to slide 6. There is a $2.3 million favorable budgetary variance in general charges. $6.6 million favorable variance under fringe benefits, and that includes $4 million for pension payments, $2.2 million attributed to the employee retirement system contributions, and $1.8 million for the police fire retirement system. There's a positive variance of $1.6 million for retiree and active employee health insurance, and all other fringe benefits, and net positive variance of $1 million. Now, there is a unfavorable variance in judgments and claims under other general charges, and that's approximately $4.5 million, and that's attributed to a settlement of a lawsuit this year. Moving on to slide 7, we have a breakout of the city employee count as of December 31st, 2019. The city budgeted 2,682 full-time equivalent employees. As of December 31st, they had 2,427 filled, which was a vacancy of 255, or approximately 9.5% of their budgeted workforce. As we dig down a little bit, you'll see a breakout for police and fire as well. Under police department, there was a 798 positions budgeted. 727 were filled for a vacancy rate of 71, or 8.9%. I'd like to note that a portion of that filled rate, approximately 26 of the 727, were actually recruits who are now in the field with a senior officer working on their second component of training. Under the fire department, they had budgeted 742 positions, and as of December 31st, 696 were filled with a vacancy rate of 46, or approximately 6.2%. Something that you don't see in that number also is the fact that the city had over 35 individuals that were listed as injured on duty, long-term disability. So those individuals count towards the fill rate, yet they're non-deployable to firehouses. And that brings us to slide 8. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Jeanette.
Thank you, Bryce. So to kind of summarize the key points of our analysis and our recommendations, at the end of the second quarter, the city was estimating a year-end surplus of $1.1 million. Since then, there's substantial uncertainty regarding quarter 3 and quarter 4 due to the coronavirus pandemic, and the related economic impact, which, as Chair Olson indicated previously, is expected to be pretty significant. Unfavorable results clearly would result in reductions to the unrestricted fund balance. Another item to consider, which could make things more problematic, is there still has not been the receipt of the casino revenue. The projected revenues that Bryce discussed does include the receipt of that money by year end. It was budgeted at $11 million, and as a reminder, the city conservatively excluded the past due amount from the budget in total. So the past due amount at $9.5 million is not included. So, that issue is somewhat mitigated by the fact that $9.5 million was excluded from the budget. Looking at unrestricted fund balance. Unrestricted fund balance in total at the beginning of our fiscal year was $51.5 million. And as we discussed, the unassigned fund balance is zero. The Emergency Stabilization Fund, which we commonly refer to as the Rainy Day Fund, it has been consistently maintained at 30 days of expenditures and is currently $38.5 million. Next slide. Bfsa has made this recommendation over the last many quarterly reports, and we continue to make the recommendation that revenues be closely monitored. There's an expectation that there will be unusual or large fluctuations, and that the financial plan be modified as necessary. With respect to expenditures, which is the next slide, number 10, as of December 31st, 2019, the city was projecting an unfavorable variance in expenditures of $0.8 million, but that was a very conservative projection. The city is very conservative in their projections under normal circumstances, considering the current environment with closures of services and workers. Vacancies, it could be higher than what we have seen in prior years. So when we do our analysis, we recognize the conservative nature of the expenditure projections because it does include the underlying assumption that all positions are filled for the remaining 6 months. The most significant budget variance, as Bryce indicated, is in the fire department, and our past analysis when we evaluated the collective bargaining agreement showed costs escalating over the life of the contract. So that is something to consider. We recommend the city assess projected expenditures in the current financial plan and adjust the upcoming May 2020 financial plan as appropriate. And just a broad recommendation for the city to take immediate steps to manage the fiscal impact from the coronavirus pandemic. And then just as a little flavor around, yes?
Is this where we want to point out that we made a recommendation for a resolution on looking at a line of credit or other financial ways of ensuring liquidity for the city?
In the district, yes. If I remember correctly, that was a recommendation that the full board passes, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I can go through my notes, although I just put out the wrong notes. I apologize. Let's see. The resolution that was passed by the Finance Committee was to direct the executive director, myself, to forward our concerns and recommendations to the city and to the district to establish communications with their financial institutions to obtain some level of liquidity, whether it's through a line of credit or some other type of short-term financing vehicle, and to get that in place considering the pandemic that we are currently encountering. Did I phrase that appropriate?
I think so. I'm not sure whether or not we need to make that as a motion or just to accept the recommendation of the Finance Committee.
I think the latter.
I believe the latter. We could the board can approve the recommendation without a resolution. Correct.
So I would move we do that.
Second.
Any discussion?
I would
All in favor?
say, I think. Okay. Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Fred.
I was just going to say that I think that it's important for us to back up what I suspect the city is already doing, so that as this becomes more of an issue, that we're as supportive as we can be, given the difficulties that everybody's going to be facing.
Yeah, I'm certainly going to say the same thing. I would certainly add, though, that I have enormous confidence in the city and their ability to react and aggressively but conservatively go forward. Certainly, any assistance we can provide, and I think the bond situation that we discussed would be one. We certainly will. But as Jeanette pointed out, through conservative budgeting, conservative staffing, the city's done very well with uncertainty, and I think they're situated well to deal with it. And we're certainly available to help to the degree that we can.
This is Donna Estridge. We have started looking at what we anticipate losing for the rest of the year. Plus, we are looking at our budget and areas that we can freeze accounts or, discontinue spending from. So we have started that process. And I'm sure I'll be in contact with Jeanette.
Yeah, certainly anything we can do to help, we will.
Thank you.
This is really kind of unprecedented.
We've spent the last week setting up employees at home and laptops, and so that's been our focus the last week and over the weekend.
Right.
Donna, may I ask a question?
Sure.
If you had to buy the laptops or did you?
We had to buy laptops. We bought 60 laptops, and we have been sending employees home with their desktop computers also.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions or comments? While I don't certainly envy the city's challenge, again, I'm quite sure that they will meet it expeditiously and well.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think I'd just add that I want to say that I really appreciate the leadership of the mayor on all of this. I think he, along with the county executive and the governor, have shown the rest of the country how to be strong and portable leaders that are protecting their communities. And I think we really do appreciate all the work that they've done.
For sure. I think it is an example that hopefully can be followed by other particularly federal government. Anything else? Okay, we will now move to district items. We previously requested from district leadership routine updates on the progress towards achieving financial goals of the deficit closing initiatives as included in the financial plan. This process is critical as the district intends to be operationally balanced by 2020-21 and has projected significant budget gaps over the financial plan. This process is obviously even more critical with the uncertainty regarding future state funding and due to the pandemic. Our staff have prepared a report on the review on the progress towards these deficit closing plans prepared as of last December, which is included under tab 4. We will also review the second quarter analysis at this time and the New York State executive budget. These items have also been provided under tab 4. Nathan and Jeanette will discuss these items with us. Jeanette?
I'm sorry. Did we move on to the Buffalo City School District items?
We did, yeah.
Okay. I just have one comment before we pass on. There's a couple slides in the presentation that address the New York State executive budget. We were talking a staff meeting this morning as to the applicability of these slides, and they're probably not terribly relevant right now considering they'll change a lot. Right. So I want to point out that was provided to you. We did include those in the board book. At that time, the state was not intending to increase state aim. That's where we were at that point. So before we move on to the Buffalo City School District, I just wanted to have those comments for you. And then the second quarter report, I will have Nathan review his analysis, and I will wrap up with the final conclusions again.
Okay. Nathan?
Thank you.
Very good. I'm here.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The following is a review of the Buffalo City School District's 2019-20 second quarter financial results at December 31st, 2019. This presentation begins on slide 17. This slide is an overview of the adopted and projected revenues and expenditures. The 1920 adopted budget included a $10 million deficit. At the end of December 31st, 2019, revenues were projected to be unfavorable by $3.1 million at fiscal year end, while expenditures are projecting to be favorable by $10.5 million at fiscal year end. This would reduce the deficit from the $10 million in the adopted to $2.6 million. Slide 18 is a breakout of all the individual revenues. As I had mentioned, $3.1 million unfavorable projected at fiscal year end. That is the net of New York State aid projected to be unfavorable by $5.2 million, as well as favorable projections within Erie County sales tax and the federal Medicaid reimbursement. State aid is projecting to be unfavorable based on actual prior fiscal year expenses, as well as the current fiscal year complement of the population. Erie County sales tax revenue had been very conservatively budgeted. The projection of $48.5 million at fiscal year end would actually be lower than the prior fiscal year's actual by about $300,000. Of course, without all the uncertainty going forward, it's much more difficult to project. But we had believed that this number would be a little bit conservative as well. Federal Medicaid reimbursement favorable at fiscal year end by $600,000. That ties into the later presentation of the gap closing measures. The district has been working on getting better reimbursement for federal and state dollars, and that is presumably a portion of those efforts. So moving along to slide 19, this is an overview of the general fund expenditures. Expenditures are projected to be $10.5 million favorable at fiscal year end. And a big part of that is both the total employee compensation and employee benefits, which are projecting to be about $10.2 million favorable at fiscal year end. This is directly the result of vacancies. They're not at 100% fill. The budget's based on 100% fill of all positions. There have been vacancies throughout the year that have been filled, but they're still not at 100%, and therefore at fiscal year end you could project a variance. Payments to charter schools are additionally projected to be favorable by $1.1 million, and that's based solely on the actual number of Buffalo area pupils within the charter schools. Finally, all other expenditures are projected to be unfavorable by $800,000. This is directly a result of custodial health insurance costs, which are projected to be unfavorable by that amount in fiscal year end. Slide 20 gives a breakout of the budgeted and filled positions at December 31st, both on an all funds and a general fund basis. I'll point out some of the big variance numbers here. General fund has 162 vacancies when you look at the actual filled compared to the budgeted amount. Significantly, this includes 41 teachers, 48 white-collar employees, and 51 mix of teacher aide teacher positions. Slide 21 is a summary of the results, and I would defer to the executive director for the staff summary. Jeanette?
Thank you, Nathan.
Do you want me to review these?
Can you hear me? I keep wondering if you can hear me. Thank you. All right. So to summarize the key takeaways, consistent with what we were saying for the city of Buffalo, there was a favorable budget surplus projected as of December 31st, 2019. But again, the negative impact from the pandemic on quarter 3 and quarter 4 is unknown. Unrestricted fund balance at the beginning of the fiscal year was $198 million, is equivalent to approximately 2.5 months of budgeted expenditures, and unassigned fund balance was $86.1 million, which is equivalent to approximately 1 month. The amount that would be available for operations is somewhere in the middle, because even within the assigned fund balance, there's set aside for encumbrances, and there's certain set asides for legal expenses that are anticipated. So not all of it is typically available, but the actual number would be somewhere in the middle. Moving on to slide number 22. As Nathan just discussed, there's a substantial vacancy rate at December 31st, and consistent with how the city of Buffalo projects their remaining 6 months of the year, they assume that there's a 0% vacancy rate for the remaining 6 years. So their projections are very conservative as well, and probably consistent with my comments for the city of Buffalo. With everything shut down, I would imagine those vacancies will be retained possibly through the rest of the fiscal year. And the recommendation, as discussed and addressed by the board, would apply here as well, which is appropriate steps. We recommend appropriate steps be taken to manage the potential financial impact from the current crisis. So at that point, I will pause and ask if there's any questions from any of the directors as it relates to the district's second quarter report.
Okay.
Okay.
Certainly not.
Nathan, I will pass it back to you we have similar slides like what we had for the city of Buffalo with the executive budget. I think there's probably a couple points in here that are still relevant to discuss, so I'm going to ask Nathan to address some of the formula changes that have been recommended, understanding that obviously the total number of funding to school districts is yet to be determined.
Very good.
So Nathan, I will pass it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. So moving along to slide number 24, this table here shows what the state fiscal year 18-19 actual aid received by the Buffalo City School District was. Totaled $772.3 million. And that's broken out by foundation aid, which is the main aid used for operations, building aid, other foundation, formula aid, other formula aid, transportation aid, and then the universal pre-K. In this table, it shows where the current fiscal year is projected to end at $785.3, includes the executive budget proposal, which of course will be likely impacted by the current crisis. And then finally, in this blue category, what the impact would be on a year-to-year basis. What I wanted to point out was what Jeanette just mentioned was that there is a proposal to make a significant change in the way that some of the expense-based aids are allotted. So the first amount here of foundation aid would increase to $46.4 million. That's an actual increase of foundation aid along with a lot of the expense-based aids which would be rolled up into the foundation aid. And that's the reason why there's such a large drop in the other formula-based aids of $29.3 million. So one is just being accounted for into that main foundation aid formula. Moving along to slide 25, here are the main recommendations that were included in the executive. The aforementioned consolidation of 10 expense-based aids into foundation aid. And I won't go through the list, but essentially the idea there is that there's all these smaller expense-based aids, and the intent of putting them all into foundation aid is to assist the high needs districts, which are not receiving a proportional amount of aid money due to them. By rolling it up into the foundation aid, it'll be more likely that high needs districts will receive aid that they could receive. And so it's a way of being more equitable in the aid distribution. The second recommendation would be to cap transportation aid to either the greater of inflation or inflation plus some measure with district enrollment. So it could go up based on inflation plus if the district expands in the number of pupils. Just transportation aid is reimbursed to all school districts based on the wealth of that area. It can be anywhere as low as 10% all the way up to 90%. By having such a large amount being reimbursed from the state, there was a need to see that if there was a way to cap it at some measure, either the inflation or adjustment with inflation, it would control school districts' spending by capping the growth. And then the final recommendation, this is for building aid. There wasn't a lot of specifics given on this, but the recommendation was to create a new tier for building aid for projects beginning in the 2021 school year. Slide 26, I won't dive into all the numbers, but if you take the actual enrollment from 1920 and divide it up into the projected state aids for each of the big four, you can see with that slide how much per pupil would be received by the big four school districts. Buffalo would receive $18,850 per pupil. Rochester would be the highest at $19,500, whereas Yonkers, which is a more affluent school district, would receive $12,600 pupil. And that summarizes the overview of the executive budget impact on the school district.
Which, as you indicated, is likely to change significantly.
Yeah. Jeanette, just for the purpose of the slides, we need to skip from slide 27 up to 44 for the portion of the presentation.
Okay. So Nathan, if you want to I guess I'll preface it by saying our board in previous meetings has requested regular updates from district officials as to the gap closing measures that were provided in the financial plan and the I guess the ability to achieve those plans. We did receive a report from the Buffalo School District in January, I believe. This report that they provided to us is as of December. So we do have some slides to review those with you, as they do still remain relevant, even potentially more relevant now, to kind of review where they're at in the process in addressing their gap, especially with the fact that the district's intent, as and conveyed for a number of years, is to be operationally balanced beginning next year with 2021. So they've been moving in the right direction towards that, with some gap remaining to be addressed. So Nathan, I will pass it to you if you wanted to please provide your analysis on the update to the 2020-23 financial plan.
Very good.
Thank you.
In your slide set, this presentation begins on slide number 44. And the first slide there is the analysis of the update to the 2020-2023 financial plan. So on slide number 44, this is a table that shows an evolving chart. It shows what the district's gap closing and cost saving initiatives are quantified. As Jeanette mentioned, the district's intent is to be operationally balanced beginning in 2021. And so of the financial plan, out year one, there is the first year where fund balance would not be utilized. And so the revised baseline gap beginning next year is projected at $18.7 million. The 3 out years have a combined projected gap of $47.5. Now this is different from what was presented back in May, in that it includes now the forecasts from the second quarter's end of a reduced deficit. And I'll go through each individual area of the gap plan. Financial plan provides a description of each individual deficit closing and cost saving initiative and quantifies the potential financial impact. So there's 5 main categories of this gap closing plan. The first 3, the potential actions, are separated into 3 categories: other revenue and fund balance items, savings to be achieved through efficiencies. That area is the main area of focus of this report. And then other cost reductions. These are cost reductions which are considered and quantified but are not planned. And I'll speak to that largely later on in the presentation. Additionally listed are various initiatives which include savings that have since been realized and or other initiatives that the district has identified as providing additional opportunities to enhance revenue or reduce expenditures but are unable to be quantified at this time. Okay, so items number 1 and 2 are other revenues and fund balance items. The first item is revenue enhancement. It's $100,000 annually for a cumulative $300,000 impact on the financial plan. And what this is revenue enhancement through better data collection and understanding of the New York State and federal regulations. I alluded to this earlier, that the federal Medicaid reimbursement was higher than budget in the current fiscal year. It's that way partly because of their efforts with this gap action here. It's not just for federal Medicaid, it's for many other items, but that's a concrete example of where those efforts have been realized. The district has increased revenues from aid maximization programs, including enhanced procedures and data collection. This was quantified in the current fiscal year at over $7 million. It's reflected largely within the New York State aid, where you see the cumulative impact that it's projected to be decreasing from budget, but those efforts have increased other areas so that they're, it reduced the net decrease because of that program. Then the cumulative impact in the following fiscal year would be over $7.3 million in new aid. Item number 2, as I had mentioned, the district does not currently plan to utilize fund balance to reduce or eliminate deficits in the 3 out years. They do list the availability of it of $10 million annually or $30 million cumulatively over the 3 out years. So they do have the ability to utilize fund balance to close or reduce out year budget gaps. At June 30th, 2019, fund balance totaled $223.7 million. It's projected to be slightly different based on adjustments at $221.1 at June 30th, 2023. And this includes $83.6 million in unassigned fund balance. Of this, $51.1 million exceeds the district's retronage policy for 4% of expenditures, and it would be available to adjust budgetary gaps. Moving along to priorities 3 through 7, these are savings to be achieved through the various efficiency efforts. Number 1 is the vacancies. Priority 3 is vacancies. This is listed as $2 million annually or $6 million cumulatively over the 4 years, over the 3 years, the out years of the financial plan. Basically, this is an acknowledgement that, as Jeanette mentioned earlier, they district budgets conservatively at 100% fill. Realistically, there will be some level of vacancy, and so there should be vacancy-related savings within compensation and benefits that would be available to transfer to other areas to reduce deficits. And doesn't present a specific action, but an area where budgetary savings are likely to occur. Priority number 4 is to reduce substitute teacher costs. This is listed at $100,000 annually or $300,000 cumulatively. This gap action was listed as achievable through better management of teacher absences. Now, we mentioned that at December 31st, 2019, the district had forecast a fiscal year unfavorable budgetary variance of $800,000 related to substitute teacher expenditures. There is a subsequent successor agreement that would have a net current year cost of $249,000 and a cumulative $1.9 million over the following 3 fiscal years. This is the agreement that we previously reviewed and would be pending district approval. So at this time, this gap action has not been achieved. Priority number 5, it would be from a nursing costs, related to nursing costs. It's $1.2 million annually or $3.6 million cumulatively. This is a reoccurring grant that the district receives every year. It's non-competitive. It would be presumptuous to include it as achieved each year in the budget because it's a reauthorization of a previous award. However, it has been received in the current year and many of the prior fiscal years. So they're including this here in the gap plan to show that it likely will be available as long as it continues to be reauthorized. Priority number 6, analysis of the top 150 vendors, best practices. This is a pretty large category here. It's $500,000 in fiscal year 2021, increasing $200,000 annually, and the cumulative impact would be $2.1 million. And what this is the district is looking at how it's spending money on contracts with vendors and service providers. The district intends to perform a full analysis of the top 150 vendors in the current fiscal year to ensure that costs are appropriate for the services that they're receiving, that they're getting all of the discounts that are available to them, and that there's proper bidding, that they're getting the right costs for district spending, getting government pricing. At the end of the second quarter, this analysis had continued, and so that the only update is that it's ongoing in the current fiscal year. Priority number 7, the school district listed closing a facility, public school number 87. The impact would be $150,000 annually, cumulatively $450,000. It is still in use. It was still in use at December 31st, and at this point, the cost savings had not been achieved. Priority number 8 would be a reduction in overtime. It's quantified at $100,000 annually or cumulatively at $300,000. This is a tightening of controls of the use of overtime. At December 31st, overtime expenditures were forecast to exceed budget by $300,000 at current fiscal year end, and so we state that the cost savings from this initiative have not yet materialized. Priority number 9, reduced compensation leave time, quantified at $500,000 annually and cumulatively at $1.5 million. The district implemented some procedural controls over the staff's utilization of the various paid leave times. This was put into place back in 16-17. Effective July 1st, 2019, the district added a new third-party administrator for all workers' compensation administrative services. They do anticipate that there will be savings from this initiative. However, at December 31st, there were quite a few people on paid leave, 7 fewer than the entire prior fiscal year and 26 greater than 17-18. And so at this point, we could say that the initiative has not generated savings to date. And then finally, priority number 10 is the last savings to be achieved through efficiencies. Savings related to the administration of special education services, listed at $200,000 annually and cumulatively at $600,000. Back in 18-19, the district made programmatic changes to the summer handicap program and reduced expenditures associated with it by $200,000. And so they're examining the whole program and anticipating that they can continue to get additional savings of at least $200,000 annually through different cost savings initiatives related to that program.
This would be without impact on the quality of services?
Presumably, yes. It's just efficiency efforts for administering the program, but not a cut in services or change in services.
Okay.
Slide number 55 is where the third section comes in. These are the cost reductions, priorities number 11 through 15. These are the items that are not planned, but have been quantified as available if necessary. They're cuts. And so the district has the ability, if new revenues are received and if fund balance is not used and efficiency savings are not achieved, there is the ability to cut. And that would be an area where they would not look to ideally, but it is available. So I'll roll through the 5 items here. They could reduce or eliminate the general contingency account, reduce the contract settlement contingency account, non-mandated programs, reduce central office positions, and then the final one would be very substantial, $5.5 million annually for $16.5 million cumulatively, reduce instructional and support positions. So this is another method that, if needed, the district would have available to them to balance. Slide 56, other opportunities. Within the GAP plan, the district lists a lot of other options that are available to them that they're pursuing or will pursue, but that really can't be quantified as a dollar amount to depend on as a specific dollar amount to reduce a gap. So this includes new awards from national foundations, continued savings within employee health care. They did issue an RFP for health insurance administrative services early this year. Implementation date of January 1st, 2021. They had cited that closing public school 187 would also result in savings. This has been done, and so those savings have been achieved. Appointing a master scheduler. This is an individual tasked with making sure that high school schedules are built efficiency. There could be savings associated with that. It's been posted and has been available since April of 2018. They have not filled that position, so it has not materialized. Okay. Moving along to slide 56 or 58, these are the results reflected already within the financial plan. The first one was to renegotiate occupational and physical therapy contracts. This option was listed back in the 17-18 GAP plan. The district opted to extend the existing contract with their current provider based on the RFP process. They determined that who they were going with was providing the best value. So the estimated savings of $1 million have already been reflected within the budgeted and projected expenditures. They also listed savings available through textbook purchases by going through a bid process rather than directly from the publisher, and it does appear that those savings have been achieved. They are reflected within the financial plan, and the current fiscal year projection shows that those savings have materialized. Moving along to slide number 59, public carrier transportation. District does receive its transportation services from both the NFTA as well as from Students First. The district entered into a 2-year contract with the NFTA. It does cost more. There's no savings associated with it. The additional cost is $582,000. However, there was a significant level of increased service with that new contract. These new costs are included in the adopted budget and financial plan. And the big update was that within the last couple of months, the district signed a new contract with First Students, Inc. The contract was set to expire at the current fiscal year's end. First Student replied again to the RFP. They were successful in it. They have a new 5-year contract worth $244.3 million, including $46.9 million in 2021. And so that would wrap up the overview of all of the individual gap closing actions. We do have on slide number 60 the conclusions, which I will defer to on. Unless there were
Nathan,
questions.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, we can pause for questions. Okay, Nathan, thank you. That's a tremendous amount of information that you did a great job boiling down onto and concising down into a few slides for us. So high-level takeaways. Last year ended June 30th, 2019. Books were closed for the district with a surplus of $28.9 million, and this is compared to an original budgeted deficit of $19 million. What's important to note here is that the surplus is due to one-time revenues and reductions in expenditures, all related to how the district has rolled out their self-insured health insurance programs last year. The availability of fund balance to balance future budgets. In the event the budget gap cannot be closed through additional revenues or savings through efficiencies, the district has broadly identified cost reduction actions. These are quantified at $30.9 million, but that amount is deemed subjective, of course. It's based on various reductions in personnel or potentially programs that are not mandated. As the priorities of the Board of Education change, those also shift around. So it just provides a broad kind of an overview of what potentially could be reduced. I kind of glossed over. I want to go back to the fund balance. The district is projecting $34.1 million of fund balance in excess of the minimum amount to be retained. So there is that, with a reminder that their fund balance policy calls for 4% of budgeted expenditures to be maintained within fund balance. And then as we stated before, the original intent was for the district to be operationally balanced next year. Several of the cost savings initiatives have been implemented, resulting in budgetary savings, as Nathan indicated. I'm on slide 61. Beginning in 2007-18, when the plan was originally put together, the district implemented certain what they classify as efficiency actions put into place to increase revenues, whether it was through enhanced collection of data or reporting of data or various mechanisms. So beginning in 2018, due to these actions, they were able to provide a schedule that indicated an additional amount of revenue of $4.8 million in 2018. This increased $2 million to $6.8 million in 2018-19, and then it increased furthermore. It's projected to increase another $200,000 to $7 million in 1920. So when you're looking at this bullet point and you're reflecting on the $7.1 million in 1920, that's a cumulative impact. The year-to-year impact is less significant, between $200,000 to $300,000. But overall, they've been quite successful in their endeavors to increase revenues through these particular actions. And then other actions, as Nathan discussed, they either there hasn't been a lot of progress in achieving those, or the district has outright eliminated them from the gap closing plan from a quantified standpoint, because they just weren't able to provide enough comfort that the actions would occur, that they could be relied on as a gap closing action. And then the last conclusions on page 60, or slide number 62. On a combined basis, the deficit closing and cost savings initiatives, they sum up to $73.2 million. There's no intent, nor is there an ability to implement all the initiatives to the extent provided in the plan. It provides, as I indicated, a kind of a roadmap that they could go back to and reflect on as the priorities of the Board of Education shifts over time. The items as listed in the plan are intended to demonstrate the multitude of factors that the district could put into place. And as we've stated in prior years, and as continues to be an important note, is the ability of the district to balance its financial plan is heavily reliant on the district's ability to leverage off of these past actions, as well as current actions to result in efficiency savings, both over the past several years as well as on a go-forward basis. And that, other than our kind of blanket warning about the contingent, revenue stream as it exists in the financial plan, there's a lot of unknown impact on state aid and sales tax. The district isn't as reliant on sales tax as the city would be, for example, but extraordinarily reliant on state aid. So that is an area we will certainly be closely monitoring, and as we receive information on that, we will disseminate it to the board. So with that, I will pause again to see if there's any questions before we move on to the next agenda item. Okay, thank you. Chair Olson, I think we are ready to move on to the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency.
Okay, I just had one question. Is there any indication of progress in bargaining with the teachers union, which obviously is a major budgetary provision?
The last we spoke to Nate Kuzma, the general counsel, who's also the chief negotiator on behalf of the district, there wasn't a lot of progress towards that. In fact, I think, I'm going off memory, I thought there possibly was a filing by the BTF about an impasse, or there was some type of filing, but there had not been a proposal made that was moving forward. We certainly haven't received any proposal on our end from what the district was considering.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's obviously a big question.
Absolutely. That's a tremendous outlier that could have sweeping effects on the financial stability of the district. Absolutely.
As would a return to the unfortunate past practice of just letting it linger unaddressed.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Do we move on now to Bmha?
We do.
Okay. I'm following still. Next, our agenda items related to the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency. We have 2 items, including a brief review of the 2019 financial statements and a review of the second quarter report. The Bfsa report on the quarterly report is included under tab 5, along with a copy of the management letter issued by the auditors. Bryce will review these items with us.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for turning it back over to me. We're going to first begin with a review of the Buffalo Urban Renewal Agency's 2019 financial statements. This material was originally prepared for the December board meeting, but was subsequently tabled at that time. I just want to make sure everybody knew that the financial statements Bmha had met all their timeliness and had no problem turning them around. So our presentation begins on page 64 of the presentation. As you're aware, Bmha is a component unit of the city. At June 30th, 2019, the total fund balance was $6.3 million. $5.9 million of that was in the general fund, and that can be further broken down by $3.6 million non-spendable, $620,000 restricted, $2 million unassigned, and this is an increase of $1.3 million compared to the prior year, and this was attributed to the increase in property sales. Another category of the fund balance is the Cdbg Fund, and there's approximately $369,000 in non-spendable reserves there. That's flat year to year and represents the real estate that's been acquired for resale. Moving on to page 65, total expenditures at the fund level totaled $46.5 million. Federal grants made up the largest component of that, roughly 97%, for $45.2 million. Majority of that was in Section 8 housing for a total of $35.5 million, or 76%. Cdbg expenditures made up 17% of these expenditures at $6.8 million, and the home program $2.9 million for 8%. Compared to the prior year, you can see it was a slight decrease. The 2018 total expenditures, $46.5 million compared to the $47.3 million. Federal grants decreased slightly by $600,000, but still made up 97% of that. There was actually an increase of approximately $800,000 in Section 8 housing, decrease on the Cdbg expenditures, and the home program. And that's really attributed to projects winding down in 2018 with a new slate of projects beginning in 2019. On slide 66, we have a snapshot of the financial statements. summary snapshot of that. Left total revenues up top by major fund, general fund, community development, Section 8, and then total governmental funds. And then you see it compared to the prior year. So some of those data points I just discussed, increase in total revenues by approximately $650,000 year to year, as well as a decrease in expenditures on a total governmental fund basis from $47.3 million down to $46.5 million. And as was noted at the beginning of the presentation, a increase of $1.3 million for total fund balance. Slide 67. I actually touched upon a few of those points already, talking about the year-to-year decrease. Moving on to slide 68, there was a year-to-year decrease of $1.9 million in rehabilitation and preservation activities, decrease of $1 million under home, Cdbg and general fund expenditures decreased by $800,000, and then all the non-major funds decreased by the additional $1,000 on a net year-to-year basis. There was an increase of $300,000 for planning, management, administrative functions under economic development on a year-to-year. Slide 69 is a breakout of Opeb going back to June 30, 2019, up through the most recent estimate that was completed June 30th, 2019. The low point we'd like to point out was $12 million in June 30th, 2013, and that's increased by approximately $13 million since that time. The last time the full analysis was completed was June 30th, 2017, and that was a year-to-date, from June 30th, 2017 to June 30th, 2019. That's an increase of 3.3%, or approximately $800,000. And a component of that change was the new GASB Statement 75, the accounting and financial reporting. So it was more technical changes than new liabilities being taken on by Bmha. Moving on to slide 70. All prior year findings have been addressed. There are no current year findings. This is the fourth consecutive year for Bmha. The financial statements reflect the implementation of GASB 83 and 88. And in addition, there was a recommendation for Bmha. This is really a staff-driven recommendation, I'd like to point out. They'd like a formalized loan write-off procedures, federal cost allowability, termination, cash management policy, improvement in human resources, as well as financial accounting system capabilities, and subrecipient monitoring. So I know I went through that rather quickly. These are the financial statements as of June 30th, 2019. So are there any questions at this time?
Bryce?
Yes.
Bryce? I would just want to clarify
Bryce.
that the recommendations are written policies for all those.
Written. Thank you.
Items.
Yes. And just for the record, that was Mrs. Tracy Cooley, the financial director of Bmha, and she just wanted to clarify those recommendations for Bmha is the formal written policy specifically.
Bryce, this is actually Tracy Cooley. That was Commissioner Estridge.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
All right. I guess there are no additional comments for the record. We'll move on to slide 71, which is the beginning of Bmha's second quarter report. Page 72 is a breakout of the HUD allocation. It just breaks out the total of the $18.7 million between the component that Bmha keeps, approximately $9.3 million, and the rest that the City of Buffalo manages at $9.5 million. Moving on to the next tab. As of December 31st, 2019, there was no significant variance to expenditures through the second quarter. $5.3 million was expended to that time. And just for a reference, Bmha draws down and can utilize past year funding. Since their fiscal year, July 1st, is staggered compared to the federal fiscal year of October 1st, Bmha comes in with the understanding that they're drawing down prior year funding to fund a good 4 to 5 months of operations before they even get a chance to draw down the current year. As of December 31st, 31 out of 39 positions were filled. Salaries and fringe benefits totaled $1.7 million. And as we noted, Bmha's operations are very dependent on HUD funding. So whenever there's a reduction, it places additional constraints on Bmha's operations. Next slide, 74 and 75, are actually summaries of several projects that have been ongoing for Bmha. In the past, when we've discussed Bmha's quarterly reports, we've noted that timing of the drawdown of funds will have an impact. So, what that timing are these projects. So we have a few here. Jefferson Ave Apartments, $31.1 million project, mixed income apartments, estimated completion date of July 2020. The Purdy Street was an infill project of 2 homes, 2 single-family homes. Those have been issued a certificate of occupancies, and the residents are in there. Elam Townhomes, that project's moving forward. Occupancy is expected by the end of April. Slide 75, we have the Hope House. This is another project converting public school 57 to supportive housing units. They're moving forward with that. Westminster Commons, $22.6 million redevelopment project, 2 builds, 84 units of affordable housing. That's expected completed in April of 21. And then we also have the Trinity 1 Apartments. Expected completion of that is November 2020 and 2021. So there's a couple projects in the pipeline for Bmha moving forward now, and they were constantly in contact with groups looking at other viable projects to move forward in. Moving in tab 70 or page 76, we'd like to note that Bmha continues to look for additional revenue sources. Bmha was awarded a grant of $80,000 from the Enterprise New York Cities for Responsible Investment in Strategic Enforcement, Cities RISE program. Subsequent to the December or the second quarter report being issued, they were awarded an additional $1 million from this group for Bmha. There was, as you're aware, back in November, a raid on some of the Bmha offices conducted by the federal branches, FBI, and 2 others. Currently, there is no restrictions placed on Bmha's operations, and they can still draw down and expend funds as needed. And that's an open matter by the federal government at this time. And at that time, that's really all I have on the second quarter report.
Okay, any questions? Okay. Hearing none, we'll now move to a review of the BMHA's second quarter report and the 2019-20 capital plan.
Good afternoon. The following is a review of the BMHA's second quarter financial results. The presentation starts on slide 79. Slide 79, this is a table showing what the adopted budget looked like. It includes the total revenues of $46.7 million, expenses of $46.2 million, for net operating income of $500,000. The cash impact after factoring in debt service and backing out the non-cash OPEB accrual was at minus $200,000. Slide 80. Subsequent to the end of the second quarter, on June 30th, 2020, BMHA amended their 1920 adopted budget and the 2023 financial plan. This included increased revenues of $0.9 million in the current fiscal year. $800,000 of that was attributed to the HUD operating subsidy, and then also the HUD Housing Choice Voucher income received an initial budgeted $100,000. So of the $900,000, all of the increase was due to HUD activity, most of it for the operating subsidy. This is their projection for the current fiscal year for revenues. They also increased their budgeted expenses by about $100,000. They added in one additional executive level white collar employee. This is an architect. And so both revenues and expenses were adjusted for 1920. Slide number 81. This shows a breakout of the revenues based on the budget to date and the actual at December 31st. Revenues, as I mentioned, they were projecting to be over budget for the HUD subsidy, and so the variance at that date was $800,000. That is expected to be received at current fiscal year end. Net non-dwelling income was unfavorable by $200,000. That is not expected at fiscal year end. That HUD is below budget with most of their revenues. However, they did receive approval to raise rents at the Marine Drive complex. That was implemented in December, and so a 10% increase in revenues was not budgeted but will be received and is expected to offset losses at other asset management properties. All other revenues and transfers from capital grants are projected to be unfavorable by $400,000 combined. And so total revenue is, the variance of total revenue was $200,000. Moving along to slide 82, taking a look at the expenses, total expenses were favorable by $500,000. BMHA has some employee vacancy, and so there's now forecasted favorable budgetary variances within maintenance positions for their compensation and their employee benefits. Utilities are the largest portion there. The date was $500,000 less than budget to date. That's largely attributed to less of a need for natural gas during the winter. Winter was less severe than it could have been, so there was less usage of natural gas. And so expenses were favorable by $500,000. Okay. Moving along to slide number 83. This is an update on the opportunities that BMHA listed in their budget and financial plan. They noted that the Capital Fund financing program was an opportunity for BMHA to borrow against future Capital Fund program allocations. The update with this is that the Board of Commissioners has authorized the executive staff to apply for the program. BMHA contracted with a company, Dominion Due Diligence, to perform a physical needs assessment. The cost was not to exceed $380,000, and when we last discussed this with management, the physical needs assessment had been planned to be done at the end of the current month. Now, I don't know if that's actually going to happen given recent events, but that was the last update that they're nearing completion with that work. moving along to slide number 84, this slide depicts budgeted versus actual employees. This is the staffing plan that was included in the adopted budget, not the modified. And so the modified in January would include one additional employee that has now been filled. Taking a look at this slide, you can see that all but 10 positions have now been filled at December 31st, and 9 of these 10 are within capital improvements and asset management, which is where the vacancies exist. There's one finance position that is budgeted but unfilled at the moment. And that would conclude my brief overview of the BMHA's second quarter financial results. I'll defer to the Executive Director.
Thank you. The conclusions and recommendations begin on slide number 85. Most of these have already been discussed already. The adopted budget included net income of $500,500, and after taking into effect the payments of principal on debt, interest is an expense that's included within the budget, but principal is not an expense. It's a balance sheet item. There's a cash reduction of $0.2 million reflected within their financial plan and the budget for the current year. The financial results at December 31st, 2019 were slightly favorable, largely consistent with the budget overall. Most of the favorable variance in expenses is due at December 31st to seasonality and the timing of payments. Some level of fiscal year-end favorable variance is anticipated due to the vacancies in the first 6 months of the fiscal year. BMHA does not forecast expected year-end operating results, and Bfsa recommends that BMHA include year-end projections on a go-forward basis in order to allow for closer monitoring of the budget. As discussed and as we know, the Housing Authority is heavily funded with federal dollars. It is unknown what the future impact will be from the pandemic, and BFSA recommends immediate steps be taken as appropriate to manage the potential financial impact from the current crisis. I will pause at this point before we go into our last item, which is the review of the capital plan. Any questions?
This is Fred Floss again. I would just add that I think they're going to have the same kinds of liquidity issues that we talked about for the city, and that they need to think about those types of plans if they haven't already.
Thank you.
Okay, I just would like to acknowledge the improvement in collaboration between the authority and BFSA, and to commend Gillian and his staff for that improvement. Anything further? Okay, I guess now we will see if there's any new business.
Actually, there's one last item left.
Okay.
Which actually, it speaks to your point about the collaboration with BMHA and BFSA. So we did receive the current capital plan, which Nathan has a few comments on, and it's a few because the current capital plan is being developed. So this is this is the most current information that we have, and I think that's the last item on the agenda, and that'll wrap up what we were asked to bring to this meeting for BMHA.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fred Floss again, just before we get to that, and we're looking at the capital fund as we're now seeing the changes in interest rates. Is it possible for the control board to borrow for BMHA and therefore maybe reduce their debt service, or is that not appropriate given the new capital plans that they're going to be proposing?
That is a very good question. BMHA has never issued debt before themselves, so we've never looked into that. I will certainly do my research on that and get back to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Nathan, if you want to move into the capital plan, we can get through our last item.
Very good. I'll summarize this briefly. This presentation begins on slide number 88. The full report gives a breakdown of all of the individual asset management programs, how the capital funds would be allocated for each one over a 5-year period. I'm going to focus primarily on the overall program for 1920, but just note that the report provides all of that backup material for the individual AMPs. So slide 89 is the introduction of the program. The capital plan includes BMHA's planned commitments for infrastructure improvements, modernization, and other systemic upgrades and repairs for fiscal year ends 20 through 24. It's a 5-year plan. It demonstrates to HUD how BMHA can utilize the capital fund allocation that they receive. The capital plan includes 3 main HUD budget line items: development and physical work, soft costs, and other costs. I won't go through each individual one, but just a couple of the main ones here. For development and physical work, this includes things like site acquisition, site improvement, what is not being utilized now, CFFP, which is the financing program, debt service, likely that will change if they borrow for and participate into that program. And it includes demolition as well. Soft costs include transfers to operations, funds utilized by general public housing operations, management improvements, which is I'll give a good example of that. BMHA is installing a authority-wide fiber optic network. That is an example of a management improvement that they would be using these funds to improve operations. Other costs includes contingency fees, legal services, physical energy audits for facilities, and then the RAD program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. Slide 93 gives the 5-year breakout of how the current fiscal year end allotment would be spent in each of those 5 years. It obviously changes every year, but this is just the way that BMHA demonstrated to HUD how they would use similar funds. Includes transfer to operations, management improvement, etc. The fiscal year 2020 allotment from HUD was $11.6 million. The full plan breaks that out by AMP for each usage. And then just to summarize it, page 94, slide number 94, the capital plan included an estimate of $11.6 million in each year. The total over the 5-year life of the plan was $58.1 million. The plan depicts how BMHA demonstrated to HUD how the program grant could be utilized. It estimates how funding at the same level would be utilized in the next 4 years. It would likely change. The plan itself and the allotment itself will change based on the HUD's allotment and as well as their updated needs. And as I noted, BMHA does intend to utilize the CFFP program in 2021. The physical needs assessment authority-wide is being conducted the 21-25 capital plan will be amended based on BMHA's estimated needs and the available funding. That would conclude my brief overview of BMHA's 5-year capital plan.
Any questions? Jeanette?
Yes.
Are we finished with the authority?
That finishes our agenda items, and then just a question as to new business, and then after that we can close.
Okay. Any new business to bring before us? Any general comments? The only general comment I would make is that obviously, in addition to being prepared to borrow at a better rate and to backstop the city, we're available as needed and should be flexible with respect to special meetings as things develop.
Okay. Move to adjourn.
By acclamation. Okay. Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
It actually worked out reasonably well.